The dreaded and predicted reprisals against Israel's raid on a Palestinian refugee camp in the occupied West Bank did indeed come to pass in a violent fashion. A Hamas militant drove his car into a bus queue in the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, pulled out a knife and began stabbing people. 8 were wounded. The raid itself, one of the most intense in the West Bank in nearly 2 decades, appears to be ending tonight. Israel says it is withdrawing its troops, but they leave behind at least 12 Palestinian deaths and a warning that there may be similar operations in the near future.
In the city of Jenin tonight, there was no escape from it. Even the hospital grounds shake to the sound of gunfire. In the fading light, commotion outside the operating theatres. Broken stones at the ready as the Israeli operation entered its second night. The doctors and the nurses hardly move as the drones swarm and the heat rises.
The sound of gunfire, you can just about hear it there. And again, and in the distance, you know, we see smoke, we hear ambulances.
Earlier today, at that very same spot, a local television crew filmed what it said were volleys of tear gas being fired. This is an operation that the West Bank has not seen for a generation. A city that witnessed some of the worst fighting of the Second Intifada. I was standing in my kitchen, says this woman, when a bomb exploded. I felt like the world had caught fire. Israel says this is counterterrorism. It's given it the name Operation Home and Garden. Its army released this footage today of what it says is one of its patrols in the basement of a mosque uncovering homemade bombs. But this was downtown Tel Aviv, where a pickup truck was driven into a crowd of people standing outside a shopping centre. The driver emerged wielding a knife, but was shot dead shortly afterwards. 2 of the people who were on the pavement are now in a critical condition, said the police commander. The attacker, he says, was a resident of the Palestinian territories. Tonight, the Israeli military told ITV News that it was withdrawing from the Jenin refugee camp. But some Palestinian groups have said this is a ruse to lure out their targets. They believe the second day of this operation will not be the last.
Well, the refugee camp at the centre of Israel's operation is on the edge of the city of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. It's home to around 14,000 people. The Israeli Defense Forces said it had become home to a terrorist stronghold and command centre from which multiple attacks into Israel had been launched. Rohit is on the West Bank tonight, from where he gave us this update just a short while ago.
Raggy, it's been a relatively peaceful evening here. I say relatively because all we can hear, and I'm not sure if you can pick up the sound, is this distant hum of this drone that has been hovering overhead. Despite the suspicions of some Palestinian groups, it does seem to me that the Israeli operation here, if it's not over yet, is certainly coming to a close. But of course, this isn't over in a broader sense, because that battle between these questions about security and self-determination continue. And so despite the scale of the operation of this week, it is really only one paragraph in the long and ongoing story of this conflict. But it's not over in a narrower sense as well, because it's clear that this town, Jenin, which featured so prominently in the Second Intifada, is now being identified by the Israeli military as not just a current, but perhaps a future focal point for its operations. It's talked about it as being a terrorist hotbed, a terrorist factory. And so, speaking to civilians today, it appears that there is an expectation here that even if this operation is over, even if it somehow doesn't escalate, the Israeli military will return, and so will violence.